Top Gun Maverick has had some pretty impressive box office numbers. It made $1.5 billion total between domestic and international audience during its run time in the theaters. It's number 5 on the all-time list of top grossing movies, at least at the time of this recording. It accounted for 50% of the Paramount revenue for 2022. Let that sink in. 50%. Now, people simply loved it. That's why it has an IMDb score of 8.3, as well as a 96% score on Rotten Tomatoes. In an era of fan-eviscerated rebooted franchises, prequels, and sequels, what made Top Gun Maverick stand out? Now, I know we could gush about the practical effects of the airplanes where there wasn't as much CGI used as normal. We could talk about the good acting performances of Val Kilmer and Tom Cruise. However, I think what really launched this film into the stratosphere was the story. You know, story. Something that Hollywood has forgotten to value in its rush to produce films that are filled to the brim with overt social messages designed to be rammed down our throats. Or product placement nightmares, or my personal favorite in this age of streaming, just another piece of content. Even though Top Gun Maverick's story is not perfect, it fills a void that many people around the world have needed due to the poor story structures of modern movies. Let's see how the writers were able to do what seemed next to impossible for current Hollywood. So the first question we need to ask is, who were the writers? Now, as a movie critic, one of the things I don't like to see looking at the writing credits is a lot of names. Why, you might ask? Because the more writers you have, the more likely you're going to get a movie that has a bunch of different tones. You know the saying, too many cooks in the kitchen. So I was a little worried when I saw 3 names. However, when I looked at the names a little more closely, I saw that I shouldn't have been too worried in the first place. The first writer was Aaron Kruger. He's a pretty prolific writer. Though you might not recognize his name, you have seen some of his movies, such as Dumbo, Scream 3, several of the Ring movies, as well as several of the Transformer movies. Now, personally, not all great movies, but many are decent, to say the least. The second writer was Eric Warren Singer. Now, his films haven't been as household names like Kruger's, but they were still some pretty decent movies. They include films like The International and American Hustle. Then, things start to get really interesting for me as we look at the last name on the writer's list. Christopher McQuarrie. He's one of my favorite screenwriters of all time. He wrote my favorite movie, The Usual Suspect. Christopher also wrote a lot of other movies that Tom Cruise starred in, such as Valkyrie, several of the Mission Impossible movies, The Mummy, and The Edge of Tomorrow. All pretty good movies. Well, maybe not The Mummy as much. But looking at these trio, you have a lot of experience in crafting a story. Now, for the most part, they've created some good stories with characters people don't hate right off the bat. I don't think we as filmgoers really appreciate this as much as we should. Directors and actors can only do so much to make the film good. If the writer is bad, then there's not always a lot they can do to salvage the film. So we have determined the pedigree of the writers. Now let's look at how they turned the modern Hollywood legacy character expectations on their heads, and how they made a movie that nobody thought would go anywhere into a blockbuster for the ages. Now, how does Hollywood typically treat legacy characters? Let's take a quintessential example from our modern film library, from the movie The Last Jedi. Screenwriter Rian Johnson butchered as well as assassinated the character of Luke Skywalker. Now, how did he do that? He took the page out of Hollywood's playbook on legacy characters, in which Rian made the character different than what he was in the original movies. Luke Skywalker has always been a character about looking for the good in people, yet in this film, he tries to murder his nephew, who might be turning to the dark side. He also has been a character who lives into hope, and yet in this film, he lives into despair. Another page out of Hollywood's playbook around legacy characters is that they also lose their agency, meaning that the newer characters are better, smarter, and stronger than they ever were. The newer characters don't really need the legacy characters, but maybe for some advice or more likely some lazy exposition. And we see that with Rey in this film. She doesn't really learn anything from Luke besides waving a lightsaber from side to side. I mean, why is she here to see Luke anyway? I mean, she has to try to convince Luke to help her in the first place. When Luke finally does intercede, he doesn't really do that much. I mean, overall, his hologram keeps Kylo Ren busy, but at the end of the day, what does it really matter? Luke dies, and for what? So that Rey can lift some rocks with the Force and save the day? I mean, who cares? Now, from the typical Hollywood script for our legacy characters, they are bland, neutered, and often lead us to wonder what we really saw in them in the first place. Now, in Top Gun Maverick, our vaulted trio do a simple but powerful thing. They allow our legacy character Maverick to be, shockingly, Maverick. When the movie starts, we see Maverick really hasn't changed too much. He's still the daredevil pilot we respected in Top Gun. We see this play out early in the movie. It allows us to get refamiliarized with this character and reminds us of why we loved him so much. Now, take note, Hollywood. This is what we want from our legacy characters. We like them for a reason. Let's experience this reason again. The second thing the writers did was in the direct violation of the Hollywood playbook in that they allowed Maverick to have agency. Maverick was able to do stuff in this world. He wasn't the worst fighter pilot. Shockingly, no. In fact, he was one of the best fighter pilots, and we got to see this play out. He actually was able to teach the younger pilots. Unlike other movies where the legacy characters can't keep up with the newly introduced ones, Top Gun Maverick reminds us that the legacy carrier has status in this universe for a reason. So when they work together, it feels more natural, more organic. This is why Top Gun's Maverick works so well with audiences, because its story didn't cut the knees out from underneath Maverick. It actually enhanced his legacy and allowed us to see how it interacted with a new generation. So fellow screenwriters, this is what we need to do when we interact with franchises with legacy characters. We need to revisit why we love these characters and allow our audience to see these characters in all of their glory. This doesn't mean that these characters have to stay this way for the whole film, and they can be subject to having to change as well in some way as well in these films. It simply allows the audience to get grounded, though, when we allow the legacy characters to be seen initially in all of their glory. Now, the second thing is just giving these characters some agency. Allow these legacy characters to have impact on what is going on in the movie for good or for ill. Don't simply allow the new characters the ability to do things. Have them all interact together in meaningful and purposeful ways. Let me say that one more time because it bears repeating. Have the characters, the new and the legacy characters, interact together in meaningful and purposeful ways, and you'll see some really interesting things happen to your story. So what do you all think? Do you think Hollywood will learn from this box office bonanza, or is Hollywood too set in their ways? Leave a comment below. Now, if you're thinking of becoming a screenwriter, take a look at this next video coming up, which will help you to find the best software for you so you can become one of the solutions to the bad movie epidemic in Hollywood. Until the next video, live well and write well.